I interviewed 100 multi-million and multi-billion dollar entrepreneurs and found the #1 common denominator that every single one of them across industry did as their first step towards building a massive business. And in this video, I'm gonna share with you the stories of 10 entrepreneurs specifically and what they did to finally get an idea out of their head and into reality. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. All right, so the first story is the former CEO of Netflix, Mark Randolph. And Mark was actually telling me when I interviewed him that him and Reed Hastings co-founded the company to reach multi-billions, all starting from a conversation they had that within 2 to 3 days of having that conversation, they went to a mailbox and said, I wonder if we could email a CD to ourselves if we put it inside of an envelope. So what did they do? They took radical, imperfect action, not knowing all the pieces, not knowing how it would work, but just trying to attempt something, right? Taking that imperfect first step by taking a CD, putting it in an envelope, putting it in a mailbox, and seeing how they could ship it. And wouldn't you know, within a few days, they mailed it successfully and it didn't crack. The light bulb went off, and fast forward to today, that laid the foundation for what would become the multi-billion dollar corporation that we know as Netflix today. But it all started from that simple idea. All right, so next up, we have the creator of Hot Cheetos, my good friend Richard Montanez. And getting to interview this guy was awesome because he shared with me how he was actually a former janitor at Frito-Lay, actually cold called the CEO of Frito-Lay at the time and pitched him the idea for the Flamin' Hot Cheeto, which today is one of the best-selling products in all of North America. And what's crazy about this is not only did it go on to sell billions of dollars, but lo and behold, it most recently was actually made into a biopic film where Richard Montanez was actually depicted as well as his story and featured on not just Hulu and Disney, but is the first film in streaming history to be premiered on both, and he was invited to the White House for a premiere. Pretty epic for a janitor who started at a warehouse. If that's not imperfect action, I don't know what is. Next up, we have multi-billion dollar entrepreneur John Paul Dejoria. What's amazing about John Paul is when I had the pleasure of interviewing him in his office in LA, I believe it was LA, Beverly Hills area, John Paul was telling me how early on, him and his co-founder, Paul Mitchell, had a hard time trying to figure out how to actually get the capital to start the business. And so when they went to different manufacturers and tried to get bottles made, they actually used the cheapest bottles they could find, which are those little white bottles that they use today, and found the cheapest black printing for the Paul Mitchell brand, the shampoo and conditioners they still use till this day. And because they didn't have a lot of relationships with retailers, they actually did something unique and took imperfect action by going on foot to salons and selling to salons. Not only that, he did the same thing when he built Patron Tequila, when he actually found somebody in the tequila business, found a way to get the bottles made, fast forward, sold it to Bacardi for $5.1 billion. The guy is a serial entrepreneur with an amazing track record, and I highly recommend you check out his film Good Fortune. If you haven't seen it, it's a true testament to the power of taking imperfect action and the compounded effect of taking that action. So next up, we have my good friend Tarek Moussa. I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Tarek a few years ago, and he actually told me that he pitched the show to HGTV called Flip or Flop, which later went on to have more than 10 seasons. I believe they might even be on their 12th season at this stage or something like that. But one of the most fascinating things about that is while he teaches how to flip hundreds of homes on the show, Tarek actually confided with me in his interview that he actually had never flipped a single home before he ever got the show. How crazy is that? If you think about it, imagine how many real estate investors had been flipping for years, maybe even decades, and maybe thought about getting a show on TV, but maybe had limiting beliefs or maybe were scared. Not Tarek. He took imperfect action, actually cold emailed different production companies and HGTV. Fast forward to today, he successfully flipped hundreds of homes and has done tens of millions of dollars in revenue, all starting from taking imperfect action to flip his first home on live television. Pretty wild. Next up, we have Tom and Lisa Bilyeu, the billion-dollar founders of Quest Nutrition. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing them, and one of the most fascinating things that Tom and Lisa told me was that they actually had zero experience in the protein bar business. They knew nothing about it. They knew they wanted to get healthy, and so they literally combined together and took imperfect action to try a bunch of different recipes, see what worked, see what didn't. If you haven't checked out my interview with them, I highly recommend you check it out. We'll put a link somewhere down below. Pretty amazing to think that they would fast forward only a few years, become one of the fastest growing companies in the country, and later exit for $1 billion plus valuation. Pretty incredible stuff. Next up, we have Andy Frisella. And guys, Andy was one of the most fascinating human beings I had the privilege to interview. I actually got to go down to First Form headquarters in St. Louis, Missouri, smoke a cigar, and pick his mind about his incredible story about building the company today to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But taking us back, Andy shared with us how him and his partner had zero clue what to do in the supplement space, had zero experience, and literally went up to a store in Missouri, found a place for rent that was cheap, and negotiated a deal for $12,000 to cover a year of rent. And although it took them almost a decade to even really start making any money, they stayed the course, lived off a piss-stained mattress in the back of the shop. But although they were taking imperfect action to learn this stuff, they actually got in the trench information from customers, because when customers would come in, they'd find out what people liked, what people didn't like, what proteins they were looking for, what questions they were asking. And so by taking imperfect action and just starting to sell other people's products, they started to get data that would later lead them to start their own company with all of this intel. And today they've become one of the most dominant names in the nutrition space in the country. So pretty incredible to think it all started in a shop living off a piss-stained mattress. Next up, we have Russell Brunson, the co-founder of ClickFunnels, which today does hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and actually started when Russell took imperfect action to sell an information product about how to build a potato gun. And the reason that I find this super interesting is because you might hear that and go, a potato gun, who would buy that, right? Like, who would have the confidence to sell that? Well, when it comes to taking imperfect actions, that a lot of them, they just started with what they know and then they let that grow. And Russell talks about how a lot of entrepreneurs in the space today, yourself included, might be looking at the landscape of the internet and thinking, man, I want to sell a service, I want to sell a product. Maybe you want to sell your knowledge or information online, but you don't really have confidence if what you know is valuable to the world. Well, think about this. If Russell could sell information about a potato gun, take that experience and have the compounded effect to him actually co-founding with his technical co-founder, Todd Dickerson, chances are you could probably do something in your own lane, starting with something maybe even just a little bit better than the idea of selling information on a potato gun. And speaking of starting your own business, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, Zendrop.
Given that the e-commerce industry is growing by the trillions year over year, have you ever dreamed of running your own e-commerce business like many of the guests we've interviewed on the show? But maybe you felt overwhelmed about where to begin? Lucky for you, today's sponsor, Zendrop, solves this exact problem. You see, with Zendrop, you simply select high-quality products, add them to your store, and they handle shipping and fulfillment while you make the profit. No more guessing games on product sourcing or dealing with inventory hassles. Zendrop's platform is designed with you in mind, making it incredibly simple to launch and scale your dropshipping business in a one-stop shop. Plus, they're offering an exclusive deal. Sign up today through our link below, and their team will personally craft your very own store to kickstart your e-commerce journey. They even have weekly coaching calls to answer all of your questions and help you get up and running in no time. It's truly more than just a platform. It's your e-commerce partner waiting to join you on the path to success. So why wait? It only takes 5 minutes or less to sign up. Simply hit pause, head over to zendrop.com/passion, and let's turn your passion for e-commerce into a thriving online business today. Thank you to Zendrop for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the show.
Next up, we have the story of the $100 million man, Alex Hormozi. And although a lot of you guys might know about him and his mission with acquisition.com to get to the $1 billion valuation mark, Alex shared with me in my interview with him that his incredible journey actually started with him being a struggling gym owner, trying to figure out how to make ends meet and trying to figure out how to get his business to work. But it all started when he drove across the country, found a mentor named Sam Bakhtiar, rest in peace Sam, and took imperfect action to drive after emailing Sam to his house to meet with him and mentored Alex to learn a lot of the gym business, which fast forward to today, Alex was able to build his company, Gym Launch, sell for tens of millions of dollars, and now help entrepreneurs around the world online get more information and education about how they can do the same in their own industry. But before he became the world-renowned entrepreneur that everybody knows him for today, the reality is that very few people, a small percentage of people, will take these imperfect actions that would later lead to the bigger levels of success that you guys may be seeking in your own life. Next up, we have my good friend Iman Gadzhi, the serial entrepreneur who in his early 20s has generated tens of millions of dollars in revenue and has reached hundreds of millions of people through his social media impressions and has been a major influence to many online entrepreneurs, particularly the younger demographic looking to get their start in the online space. But what's fascinating is that although today people might know him for the millions of dollars worth of cars or watches that Iman has been able to share online, I knew him 5 years ago and I know him today. And one of the things that's been incredible is his consistency and ability to leverage and level up his talent. Iman shared with me then and many entrepreneurs online now that he actually came from very humble beginnings and that he had a single mother and an abusive household where his stepfather didn't necessarily treat him the best. So Iman knew he wanted to provide, but he didn't quite know what to do or how to do it. But he just took imperfect action and tried everything. He tried being a personal trainer, running a social media marketing business. He actually even tried doing YouTube videos and was consistent for years before reaching the millions of people today that he's been able to reach, I believe now approaching almost 4 million subscribers. The man is a class act and a perfect example about the power of consistency over time and the results that that can generate. And if you think about his claim to fame, Iman actually shared with me that he had no idea how to build a social media marketing agency, which is what he'd come to be known for originally to make his first few $1 million. But what he did was he realized that he could actually start a social media marketing business, not necessarily knowing how to run Facebook ads, finding somebody who's good at running paid traffic and actually having them to run that part of the business. And once he started making tens of thousands of dollars a month as a teenager, he started sharing it on Facebook. Fast forward to today, he's helped thousands of entrepreneurs online start their own social media marketing agencies successfully. But that all started from a kid in London taking imperfect action. That a lot of these entrepreneurs that me and you might look at and think, wow, they're amazing, they're incredible, how did they do this, are just like me and you. They're made of the same skin, flesh, and bones. The difference is urgency, and the difference is how they act on that urgency in spite of the fear. Every single one of these entrepreneurs didn't see the road ahead, they just knew the first few steps. And I'll give you one quick little bonus as well to top it off. When I started, my dream was to interview 100 of the most successful entrepreneurs on the planet that I was personally inspired by. I didn't know what to do, I didn't have any money, I couldn't figure it out. But what did I know? I wanted to interview Grant Cardone. So I took imperfect action, saw where he was one day on his Instagram story. I went to a restaurant where he was at and cold pitched him on doing an interview with him. I was nervous, I was scared, I was anxious when I was doing all of this stuff, but by taking imperfect action consistently and giving myself permission to make it imperfect initially, although I got rejected a bunch, just like a lot of these entrepreneurs got rejected a bunch, you only need 1 or 2 things to work to justify 20 or 30 things not working. My hope to you guys today is when you watch this video, you feel the fear, you do it anyways.